Hello everyone, and welcome. Both love to see souls inside of bodies, but also the souls inside of bodies that are watching from wherever they may be, and maybe even from heaven. But I don't know if they need technology, which of course is the topic, which is the Kabbalah of technology, getting comfortable with the invisible. I want to begin with dedicating the class by Seymour in honor of Rivka Bat Leah, so that she may have a refuah shlema. Rivka Bat Leah is a wonderful wife and mother who has been courageous and resilient. So our learning here is in her honor for a speedy, immediate, complete, miraculous recovery. Amen. As well as giving you, Seymour and Alan, and your family the strength to deal with this challenge and all challenges, because as we're told, that God does not give anyone a challenge that they cannot handle. So if there's a challenge, it means we have somewhere the strength and the resilience and the resources to deal with it. And it's a critical message, because, like, you know, if you had two choices to ask God, you can say, please God, give me a life without burdens, without challenges, without difficulties, without losses. Or option two, give me a life that when I do face challenges and I do face a loss, that I'll always have the strength to be able to deal with it. Which one would you choose? So most people, of course, would choose number one. It sounds simpler. However, if you think about it, it's not really realistic. And more importantly, it means that, so to speak, someone's protecting you from all the challenges. When you go to sea, you want to get the blessing that you can be a great swimmer, which means no matter what happens at sea, even if there's a storm, you have the tools and the skills to be able to swim through it. So the greatest blessing is to tell someone that whatever comes your way in life, you should have the strength to deal with it. Now, obviously, we pray and we hope that we have the least amount of challenges, the least amount of traumas and difficulties that cause us to that cause us grief. 1 second here. However, as I said, realistically speaking, life is going to have challenges. And the key thing is to remember that we have the strength. I don't know if you know this, but there was a book, the biggest best-selling self-help book ever, called The Road Less Traveled, by Scott Peck. It was published in the early 70s, and it hit whatever 600 or 700 weeks on the bestseller list, the New York Times bestseller list, which is another discussion whether that's even accurate, because they say the Bible sells more books than all the bestsellers put together, but the New York Times does not does not deem it important enough to mention. So you can't count a book that's outselling everybody, because it would always be number one would be the Bible. And that wouldn't look very good, right, for a secular society. However, this book was what they call a bestseller, and you ask, it's a book that, like many bestsellers, people bought it, but nobody read it. Or not, I can't say nobody, many people didn't read it. But everybody, when you ask them, what do you like about the book? They all say the opening line. The opening line was, life is difficult. And many people felt that resonated with me. And that's a book that resonated with me in the sense, that type of message. So yes, life is difficult, but as I said, the underlying theme and the most powerful message you can hear is that any challenge that comes our way, any difficulty, we have the ability to address. So, in that spirit, we'll begin the discussion here. You know, technology has become part and parcel of our lives. Technology was always part of people's lives, but technologies were far and in between, and they weren't and they also were not as accumulating in such a quick pace as they are today. So today, if you were born even 20 years ago, by now the technologies of today are completely different than they were 20 years ago. If you're born 40 years ago, it's even more so. I remember my first writing on a typewriter. Some people don't even know what a typewriter is. They've heard of it, but I've not seen one, because why would anyone use a typewriter? So yes, we have keyboards and stuff like that, but why would somebody use a typewriter? So today, for our children, the next generation, technology is just a given. Smartphones are relatively new, but they only get better. And the truth is, we are in technology actually in its infancy, as hard as it is to believe. Technology today, essentially, modern technology, is really more or less where television was in the 20s, silent movies, where the automobile was in the 30s. The first 10, 20, 30 years of the internet, which really burst out on the public scene in 1995. So we're talking about 20 years. It's 20 years since the birth of the internet as a social phenomenon. And you take about Facebook and Google, it's less than that even. They're all under 20 years old. However, they have taken on a life of their own and affect us in so many ways. By the time we will hit old age, if you believe it or not, that you will hit old age at some point, technology is going to be very different than what we see today. But one thing we know, that it's dramatically changing life on so many levels. And thousands and thousands of books and essays and lectures have been delivered and will be delivered on the breathtaking breakthroughs of technology. And I mean technology across the board, whether it's in the area of computing, whether it's the area of information, whether it's the area of medicine, whether it's the area of every given area. It's affecting everything. The way we gather information, basically the way they put it, that we will be able to access, we can already access anything, anything, anytime, anywhere. And as the speeds continue to accelerate in this, in the streaming and so on, it will even dramatically change even more than it has till now. Another topic that you hear a lot about technology is its negative effects on us. People write and bemoan its ability to depersonalize life. With all these connections, a lot of depersonalization. You could sit in your basement and put on a fake identity and present yourself as someone that you're not even, and play the game through anonymity. You can feel empowered because you can access so much, but not have any friends. You could have 1 million friends on Facebook and not really have one real friend in life. Some cynics even say that social media was invented by antisocial people, to be able to have social connections without really ever connecting. So with all this, what we call connections, and I'm not taking away from the first point I made about the great breakthroughs in communications and in science and all forms that the high tech has provided us, there's this downside of the darker side, to the point that you can become an addict to technology, and it can numb you from reality. So if you've been addicted to soap operas or living vicariously through others, or through whether through sports or through different characters on television or in Hollywood, the internet just makes it, exacerbates it and amplifies it so much more so. So there's that side. You don't hear much about it as much as the first point I made, but it's still discussed what the internet is doing to human beings. What is it doing to relationships? I mean, just like the obvious that the television, just the basic television, once it was brought into the bedroom, it really has become the cause for actually many marriage crises, because the television was a perfect way to hide behind the TV. Instead of having to have a conversation at the most intimate moment, at the end of the day when spouses get together, and I'm not even talking from a point of view of sexuality, I'm just talking about some quiet time. So now we have a television on. Great way to avoid having to deal with relationships. And technology can have the same type of effect. This doesn't mean technology is a bad thing. It's like what they said I remember at the onset, the dawn of the internet, the line was, or computers, the line was, junk in, junk out, or garbage in, garbage out. That a computer, like anything, is simply neutral. If you put junk in it, you get accelerated junk. If you put content and good stuff in it, then it accelerates that as well. And that is true. Like all technology, is fire a good thing or a bad thing? It depends how you use it, whether you harness it for good things or it becomes destructive. But what I want to address is something far less spoken about, and this is almost from the mystical and the spiritual perspective. And that is that when you look at the bigger trends of history, including science and scientific developments, there is a so-called an invisible hand, a pattern that you can see that has evolved. So it's not like the internet was suddenly born in 1995. We know today that the internet actually was a invention during World War II, top secret for the United States during the time of war. And we all know war is the father of all invention. That it was then a way of communicating internally for the U.S. military. And it wasn't until the late 60s, in the early 70s, where the government finally decided to make it public, and first gave it to the universities, which is why the first websites were edu. And then when HTML, when language, the first computer language was written, that's when it began to become a force. But that's in the early 70s. It took another 20 years till it became commercially viable to become a public force and something we can rely on. So no technology is born out of nowhere. It usually begins much earlier than we will ever imagine. Now, if you really want to go back, if Einstein had not discovered the theory of relativity and quantum mechanics in modern physics would have not discovered the ideas of uncertainty on the level of the subatomic level of the indeterminism of subatomic particles, we wouldn't have the ability to concentrate so much energy in just so little space. We all talk about the computers in the 1950s. What you could have in your hand today, it took 10 blocks, 10 city blocks. Because how could someone compute so much information with something so small? Size did matter. And more power, you needed more size. The ability to concentrate, and it's almost amazing. Look at your smartphone. Think about how much is going on in that little space. How did they figure that out? Nobody even knows. But there's clearly some type of understanding of manipulating forces that are not defined by size. That on a concentrated level, in the transistors and microchips and so on, you can unbelievable power lies there. But that's only due to understanding inner workings of the universe that science once did not understand. So though it took time, but if you think about it, it didn't just suddenly was popped out that some entrepreneur or some marketer or some genius suddenly discovered technology. It's a process that's been going on for years. So I want to talk about that, and most importantly, that's the place I believe where we can actually have a reconciliation between the first 2 points of technology I just made, and that is its unbelievable power and breakthroughs and effect in our lives, at the same time to make sure that it can be integrated into our personal lives, instead of destroying our personal lives, actually enhancing them. But the only way you can go there is through going to the third dimension of technology, and that is, we'll call that the soul of technology, the Kabbalah of technology, hence the name of this class. And that requires really understanding something that is very obvious actually, but really lies beneath it all, beyond all the benefits that we so often are so preoccupied with. So I want to just give a small introduction of, let's call it perspective. It's an introduction on perspective. You know, most people like to think they're somewhat intelligent, right? Would you agree? I'm not saying you are, I'm just saying you like to think we are. And I'm not suggesting anyone is not. We'd like to think we're intelligent. Now, what is intelligence defined? How do you define intelligence? So, okay, so the first question is the issue, book smart, or let's say street smart. You know, we have that. There are people who are academically brilliant. When it comes to common sense, emotional intelligence, they're like two little immature children. And there are people who are extremely street smart and savvy and have that intuition. And what some people in Yiddish or a German term is called Spitzenfingergefühl. I don't know if you ever heard that expression. Spitzenfingergefühl is like, you know, you feel it at the tip of your fingers. You could just feel something in the air. It's a way of expressing, you could use that maybe, a way of expressing a type of intuitive sense. And yes, we call that type of, the somewhat mysterious street smart. Where do you learn it? Did you learn it in the street? You learn it at home? Are we wired that way? So I'm not here to analyze how we become who we are. I'm just trying to define intelligence. But if you go a little deeper and try to define it, let's say, on a more scientific level, intelligence is the capacity to look beneath the surface of something and understand what makes it tick. Whether it's intelligence in the physical sciences, or in political science, or in social science. That's what it is. Someone who's not intelligent, or someone who's not trained, or doesn't have the experience and doesn't have that ability, will look at something on a surface level. Someone with a little more intelligence will say, 1 second, that's the surface. What lies beneath the surface? Now this is critical because the fact of the matter is, the most brilliant people on earth, all of us, even if we're extremely intelligent, we are seduced by our senses. And therefore we are ultimately impacted by the externals and the surface. And I mentioned a number of times, I think I mentioned it last week, the biggest cliche that is absolutely false is don't judge a book by its cover. Do you know anyone that does not judge a book by its cover? I have not met such a person. As an author, I can tell you that they spend billions of dollars in designing book covers. So if you don't judge one, why would they spend so much money? And let's call it, in broader sense, forget about a book. Think about products. How much goes into packaging? Now, I'm not suggesting the product isn't a good product, but if the packaging isn't good, it's going to affect it, because we are absolutely affected by stimulation or the lack of stimulation of our senses. What we see and what we taste, what we see, what we hear, what we taste, touch, and smell. I was just reading a book, an article. It was new to me. Maybe it's not new to you, but I'll just mention it because it's an interesting little piece of trivia. Many times when you get a cold and you're under the weather, and even food that you like, you don't really feel like a dull taste. You don't feel it. You don't taste it. So actually, it's not correct. You're actually tasting what you usually taste, what the real taste. When you have a cold, what happens is your olfactory, your nose, your smell isn't working so well. When you put food down your throat, a scent goes up to your brain. And the scent is what you think goes together with the taste. So when that's blocked and you can't smell well, and I don't mean smell outside, I'm talking about the smell that comes with the food, so you're only getting the taste without the smell. Now, I was taken by that because I never thought of that way. I thought, maybe the taste buds are somewhat numbed when you have a cold. It's interesting. You knew that? Okay, great.
It happened to me.
No, it happens to all of us. But you have to. Anyway, my point is, our senses control our lives. But when you think about it, it's really odd in a way, because all things that really matter are not. They're not sensory based. For example, love. You can't see, hear, taste, touch, or smell love. Love can be expressed. You see someone you love, obviously, but the love is not based on senses. Love is a different tool. We could even call it a supersensory tool. Intelligence itself, the mind at work, is also not defined by the parameters of our senses. So the senses, however, are the things that are how we interact with the world around us, and they control most of our reactions. So if I were to put it in a formula, I would say that the more you can connect to your supersensory side, the less you'll be impacted by the temptations and the seductions and of the tentacles of this world, and the more you can focus on the things that really matter. As long as you worship, and as long as you're completely consumed with the things that stimulate your senses, then you're trapped on that surface level. Now, I'm not suggesting that the senses have no value. I'm not suggesting we have to shut them down. They have great blessing and great value. But don't ever think that it begins and ends with the senses. So, for instance, if someone were to say to you, if you shut your eyes and your ears, your taste, touch, and smell, what would happen? So initially, the thought may be terrifying. You'd think you'd disappear. You wouldn't disappear, because you don't need eyes to see yourself. You don't need ears to hear yourself. You don't need taste, touch, and smell to experience yourself. These are basically bridges and channels that connect us with the world around us and with other people. So what would you be left if you were able to shut your senses down completely, hypothetically? You'd be left with the inner you, your inner personality, so to speak, not as it relates to anything around you. Not that you don't communicate with it and it doesn't communicate with you. Now, of course, that's a very lonely existence, and I'm not suggesting that's a blessing. But it tells you something very interesting, that if you live on the sensor level, you're basically not in touch with yourself. So what you really want to have is the integration of the two. Understand what makes you tick within, and then your senses should be informed by that. So let's say you're walking down the street and you need to get somewhere, someone important is waiting for you. But then you get suddenly distracted by a nice image, or by a nice person, or by some other thing that is superficial but affects your senses. And you miss your appointment. And the person waiting for you say, what happened to you? You know? That's a perfect example where the senses are controlling your life instead of what your goals are controlling. However, if you're goal-oriented and you know, I have something important to do, I must get there, the fact that you see something nice, you could register and say, you know what, I'll get back to it later. Or you decide it's not important enough for me to stop, and you keep focused to what you need to get done. I'm giving a very simplistic example, obviously. It gets far more complicated when it gets to the areas, for example, in our own lives, our own integrity, our own values, the things that our idealism, and how we get so distracted and tempted and, yes, and seduced by our senses. So let's go back to the question of intelligence. Intelligence would be someone who's able to see beneath the surface. So if it's a person in, let's say, in finance, you know, or someone who's able to, he looks at, let's say, statistics, where you and I or a novice would not be able to really understand, the trained eye will see a pattern. Now, why don't you and I see the pattern? Because we're not trained, so we see the surface. I see a dot here, a dot here. The people who connect dots are people who have the intelligence of looking and see the pattern that emerges. The same thing as anyone trained in any given area, that's one key thing. You know they will see a pattern where others don't see a pattern. Now, it doesn't mean they'll always see one, but they're capable of seeing something. It's like a bird's eye view. Now, where does that come from? That comes from usually experience, trial and error, and as well as that, as I said earlier, that Spitzenfingergefühl, that certain common sense that they pick up. It's a combination of things. So essentially, the reason I'm elaborating on this is because I think it's a very good way of looking, firstly, at anything in life. It's a great way to look at your life. You know, you leave here tonight, or even right now, you leave here tonight, what drives your life? Is it the inner or the outer? Is it the sensory or is it the supersensory? Guaranteed the sensory plays a biggest role in our lives because we're not trained to really think from within. Now, if you're a person of sensitivity, a person who's looking for deeper meaning in life, obviously you're looking for that inner self. But many people will say, I don't know what it is, but something's missing in my life. I don't know what it is. I feel empty. They're really basically saying is I'm living a surface level life. I'm surviving. More than surviving. I may even be making money. I may even be successful. But my inner, whatever that inner, I'll call it soul, my inner psyche, my inner is not being nourished. I don't feel alive. I don't feel stimulated. I don't feel like I'm accomplishing anything in this world. And then we all go through an existential crises like existential loneliness where you say, 1 second, what's the point of everything I'm doing anyway? Where's this all heading? You know, let's say I make all the money I want. And what will happen then? Other things. You start wondering, am I really on the right track? Am I really living up to what I should be doing in this world? Almost any intelligent person is going to have such a question at some point. The question is what you do with it. But what is the big challenge that we have is that we are already going 90 miles an hour in a rush hour. So we don't really have the luxury when you have to support yourself and family and you have other obligations to suddenly say, you know what? I need to go through an existential review of my entire life. Most of us don't have the time for it. So we get what happens is our life is what happens to you when you're busy making other plans, as the poets tell us. So to take now this, let's return to the topic of technology. Here's a perfect example. Technology offers us many, many wonders. I mean, they say if you walk down any street or you go into any subway or on a bus, 8 out of 10 people will be on their smartphone. Probably 10 out of 10 by now, except a few, I guess, elderly or the children that don't have it yet. But it's almost like that. You can see that. You see it. Very convenient tool. Instantaneously. I remember a time where there were no cell phones. And if you were driving somewhere, you had to wait till you got to a payphone. Do you know what a payphone is? Does anybody know what a payphone is? You remember what a payphone is? It's hard to imagine. A phone with a wire that connected, at a gas station or whatever. I remember there was some urgent thing. It took me 3 hours till I finally got that payphone and I called home to find out what's going on. This is non-existent today. I mean, you may be frustrated for a moment if you're out of a cell zone or whatever it is, but even that soon is being diminished. So we have this ability, and people say, what a gift. It's a gift. And if I don't respond to the text immediately, people feel you're ignoring me, And what does it turn into? It turns into lack of a better word, an addiction at the end of the day. It's supposed to be emancipating us, but sometimes you feel you become bound to it. You're like completely trapped. And there's no such thing as downtime. Either because you yourself need to check immediately your emails or your texts or whatever it is. Now if you're really connected on every level, WhatsApp and the texts and emails, and I'm not going to go through every other possible thing, and who knows where the message came from, right? So some people, I got a message today, same message, 4 different channels. Just in case you missed my text, I'm sending you a WhatsApp. But I guarantee you, I'm not going to bug you. You're already bugging me by filling up all my channels, And I wasn't insulted because that's the world in which we live. So we have a situation where this technology is definitely creating opportunities. But I want to ask one simple question to myself, to all of you here, everyone listening. Tell me if one marriage, if one child, if one relationship has become healthier because of technology. I do not think you'll find one. Now, I understand you could say, 1 second, if I can communicate with my loved one and I don't need to go find a payphone, it makes my relationship better. I don't know who said that. Obviously, if there's an emergency or something. So it's interesting. The disproportionate the dissonance between unprecedented technologies and at the same time unprecedented breakdown of relationships. You could even argue maybe they're interdependent. As a matter of fact, the more higher, what was it? What was that law? Moore's law, right? That every 2 years, what was it? The processing doubles or whatever. Now it's even less, I think. So technology is going that way. It's, the only reason that we don't see the benefits, by the way, is because of financial reasons. They're not going to release all their, Intel's not going to release all its chips because they have to first make money on their initial investment. If they released everything they have for the next 20, 30 years, they would undermine. They can't compete against themselves. Correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, it's not basic common sense. There's no rocket science. That's why you don't see really, like in the last 2 years, computers really exploding, completely. And you must get this new computer because they're still recouping their investments, or maybe much more than recouping. And things are far faster than they once were. But if you look on the other end of things, and I deal with the other end a lot. I know technology well. I use it. You all see here, setting up this whole technology is its own pain. What can I tell you? But all for good benefit. So please, I don't take any offense, anyone watching. But I see the other side of things. I see the misery index in people's lives. People speak to me, and I'm not saying I'm not the only one. You just got to go online and you see it, how people share. So when it comes to relationships, it comes to love, it comes to the basicness of dealing with pain. Because at the end of the day, what they call, I don't like to quote marketers, but marketers, they all say it's either giving you pleasure or it's preventing pain. The pleasure principle and the pain principle are the two main things that sell. If you think of products, it's either giving you pleasure or perceived pleasure, or preventing pain or perceived pain. So like the woman says, my husband makes me sick and then he takes me to the best doctors. You ever heard that one? Oh, yeah. Okay. But the truth is that sometimes life, that's how life is defined, that we have these elements, and when we have these elements of being able to find pleasure or avoiding pain, that becomes the dominant force. But you think about it, so you have all these technologies, but when it comes to the most basic things, as I said, the most basic need in life is love. Nothing can survive without love, just like a flower will wither without water. Love is a component that every one of us needs. Children it's absolutely critical. Because if you don't give love to young children, and the nurturing and the validation, it will directly impact their self-esteem, their self-confidence, and their success in life, frankly. Now, that doesn't mean adults don't need it. It's just not, you can say an adult has at least grown into a tree, maybe a very hungry tree or thirsty tree, but love is a critical component in our lives. And yet, What happens when we are worshiping or living in the sensory world? It doesn't give us love, but it gives us distraction. It gives us the ability to numb ourselves, because you can convince yourself, hey, maybe I'll find love online. Maybe I'll find things that give me pleasure, instant gratification. And with that, we start replacing the real healthy love that we all deserve and need. Just to give one example. Now, this doesn't mean it has to stay that way. It just means that's how it is. That's the default state. So rest assured, if a person does not have a healthy, strong foundation or compass or rudder, what will technology do? You'll get lost faster than you've ever gotten lost before. Think of a ship going out to sea. Okay? So if the ship is a little rowboat or doesn't have any type of any high-tech power, and you don't have a so-called rudder, direction, you can get lost a little, take a little while, you'll start floating somewhere out in the river, out at sea. But let's say you have the most high-tech machine, high-tech yacht and boat. What's going to happen if you don't have a compass, or you don't have a rudder, or you don't have a captain? You're going to get lost very fast in the most sophisticated way, and you have no way to find it, because all the gadgetry and all this technology, it'll just take you who knows where. It's not a rowboat anymore. So suddenly technology becomes an instrument of destruction. And I don't mean to put it so in doomsday fashion, because I'm not a believer of fire and brimstone, nothing against technology. I'm just pointing out that if you don't have your soul intact, your direction, rest assured that this world is going to take you very quickly to places you don't want to be, because you don't have anything to protect yourself from. So what's the solution? Some people say, let me just live the monastic life. Let me cut myself off from the modern world, go move into some mountain, and just live a plain, simple life. That's very appealing for some. You do that, you suddenly cut off. I don't know if you've ever done this, going hiking or camping, or just cut off, and for a week you're not in touch. And you know what? And you don't die just because you didn't get a text. Okay, so you put up all the notices, I'm away for a week, so make sure that nobody thinks something happened to you. But there's something very refreshing. However, as most people will say, it's refreshing for a week, but I got to get back to real life. Well, maybe you were in real life for that week. Okay. But when we're fed a steady diet of, as I said, we become addicted to that rush, it's very difficult to see it any other way. And I read an article, I remember it was a while ago, it remained with me. There was this, what was his name? In the late 70s, there was this Iron John type of thing where men would go to these retreats and bond with each other and wear... Robert Bly, exactly, right. You got it. Iron Man. Men who felt they were emasculated in our society would go to these weekends, they'd wear hides, whatever, skins, they'd grunt and sweat, get in touch with the masculine in them, and not distracted by anything, and come back after a weekend reinvigorated. Robert Bly, right. I remember him and John Bradshaw, they were the two big healing. John Bradshaw was the inner child, and he was the Iron Man. So anyway, one of these big CEOs, it was an expensive weekend, because you reconnected to the man in you, And so one CEO comes back to work, and Monday morning they're sitting around a meeting, and he says to his friends, you should have seen this weekend. We were sweating, we were grunting, we were we got in touch with the primal forces of our inner gorilla or whatever, our inner ape, and it was great. So one of the people who was working there is one of the blue collar workers in the company says to him, boss, you want to sweat? Why don't you come work with us for a few days down at the construction site, and you'll sweat well. So he says, no, I don't have time for that. I do it on the weekend when I could fit it into my schedule. So the blue collar worker says to him, boss, if you sweat when you want to sweat, it ain't sweating at all. Instead, it's like planned spontaneity. He's going to plan his... it was a nice way to put it. So we live in a society like that. You could buy anything. You want me to buy effort? How much will it cost? You want me to buy experience. But experience comes with experience, Can you buy love? But we can delude ourselves in thinking that we can. And as smart as we are, the fact of the matter is we are all trapped on the surface level. So it's true, intelligent people can perhaps see beneath the surface, but you usually see good beneath the surface of other people. It's hard to see beneath your own surface. Because, you never have a situation where you're great at giving other people advice at things you yourself can't listen to. Anybody had that situation? Well, I could say I have, because it's easier to give advice to someone else. So when you really want to understand yourself, you want to understand the cosmos, the world around us, and in this case we're talking about technology, you have to look at the soul of matter. Soul. So just another simple example, and we use almost like an introduction to Kabbalistic mystical thinking, which is not as exotic or as cryptic as it sounds. So, let's say it's raining outside. You hear the weather report, and the meteorologists will tell you it's going to rain, so you take an umbrella, a raincoat, whatever it is. Today there's this, every news show has this few minutes where they show you the maps. I guess people like to feel that they see the weather patterns and the air pressure and like what direction the wind is blowing, as was the last time you cared whether it was going southwest or northwest, at 12 miles an hour. I guess if you're a boating person, that maybe is relevant. But fine. And then when the Weather Channel began, I don't know if you remember that, people say, no way, who wants to watch the weather 24 hours? It's ridiculous. The weather's the weather. And it became one of the most successful shows. I think my opinion is because it's the voyeurism inside of us. We like to know, we understand how weather is patterned. When, our good old grandfathers and grandmothers, you want to know, just call Cleveland and find out. If it's snowing there, in 2 days it's going to be snowing here. Now, I'm not trying to dismiss the science of meteorologists and all the doctors and all that, but, especially in New York, most predictions for snow usually doesn't end up being the way they predicted, except once in a while. Or like my grandmother used to say, that even a broken clock is correct twice a day. So it's not like you can completely be wrong. It's a little social satire here. I hope you take it with the right spirit. Anyway, so that's what meteorologists will tell you. If you really study the science of it, yes, weather patterns are based on the winds. They're based on the different currents. They're based on El Nino, different forces out there, and sometimes they build up for years, and then they have an impact. Some people say that in the last few years, weather changes, whether it's global warming or global cooling or whatever it is due to bigger effects. So this is like understanding the science behind it. But if you go a step further, is there so-called a mystical energy behind it all? So here's a simple example. You see someone cry. Tears come out of their eyes. So no person is going to say, first you cry, tears come out of your eyes, and then you feel sad. It's the other way around, right? You feel sad. For some reason, sadness translates into some type of psychosomatic effect on the human body, releasing different chemicals or forces that fill up your tear ducts, and you cry. Same thing with a smile. You see someone who smiles, has a happy feeling inside, so then their face turns into contortion called a smile. I'm talking about it authentic now. So it all begins from the inside out. However, the only way I can know how you're feeling is through your body language. So actually, interestingly, the surface level of everything is just that. It's just the surface level. It's just an expression of something inside. Now, we look at everything in the world from the outside in, except ourselves. As I said, you don't have to look in a mirror to know that you're not feeling good today. You don't need to look in a mirror to know whether you're crying. If you feel sad, you know you feel sad. So what do we know from this? What we see from this is that really, so I want to ask you, where's reality? On the inside or on the outside? Is the tear the reality, or is the feeling that caused you to have a tear? It's obvious that is the inside feeling. Not to say that the tear is an illusion, but all it is a symptom. All it is an expression. It's only an outer expression of an inner feeling. So you could put it this way, the Torah in general. And this is what Jews mastered over the centuries, over the history, over the millennia. And this is what the Kabbalah really teaches, is how to see things from the inside out, not from the outside in. How to look at events, how to look at experiences, how to look at technology and see not what it does for you, not its benefits, its features, its way of improving your life, but what is making it tick, what's going on the inside. And here's how it's understood, that from the beginning of history, there was always an understanding that there was a certain dichotomy between what we'll call matter and spirit. We'll talk between body and soul. I'll translate it into simple language. Every one of us has two voices inside of us. One is the voice of survival. That's through the satisfying your bodily needs for shelter, food, clothing, other pleasures, and other things that we feel we need or we actually need. And there's another voice inside of us called the transcendent voice. And that's not needs, that's not based on needs, and it's not based on survival. It's based on trying to experience something greater than ourselves, looking for something more ethereal, something more sublime. And we have these two voices. You could say it's basically like almost like the dissonance between body and soul, between the outer and the inner, between form and function. So we live in a world, a duplicitous world, where we have a world of duality, where there's these two forces. In scientific terms, Einstein and others called it matter and energy. Now, matter and energy, until E equals mc squared, Einstein's great formula, matter and energy were not seen as one thing. They were seen as two different realities. So matter was what we experienced on an empirical level, and energy is what was an inner force. Today we know there is no such duality. Matter and energy are exactly the same thing. They just, to use the simplest example, a piece of ice is solid water, frozen water. You melt it, it becomes fluid water. You heat it, it becomes gas. And you can reverse this process an infinite amount of times, unless there are other factors involved. You heat the water, it turns into gas. If you bottle the gas and cool it, you can turn it back into liquid. You freeze it, it turns into ice. Now, the gas part, no one can see really. We only know it turns into gas. So we understand today that there's no such thing as something being utterly destroyed. You take a piece of wood and burn it into a fireplace, it just turns into energy. And even when the fire goes out, the energy dissipates into the universe. It doesn't disappear. It just disappears. You can't benefit from it. So essentially, science is really the search for those inner forces that connect everything. Some people would simply put science is the search for unity, a unifying rule that explains many different phenomena. Now, if you think about, going back to what I said before, using Torah as an example, Kabbalistic thought, that's exactly what it is. It's seeing the soul that connects things. Basically using this formula. In the world of matter, in materialism divides, spirituality unites. If you want to experience love, you need to touch the soul of things. Each of us sitting right now in our chairs, on a physical level, we sit each one in our own space. You can't sit in my chair, I can't sit in your chair. However, if we connect on a soul level, we may not have to. We can still be as one, even though our physical bodies are in different spaces. You could have two people. You could have 50,000 people in a stadium cheering, and they don't even know each other. And when the game is over, they all go home, strangers. You could have people who are a million miles apart, but their love connects them and transcends time and space. So the bottom line is that we have two realities that are going on all the time in our lives. What's happening on a material level, and what's happening on call it a spiritual or energy level. Now, throughout history, these two have become very separate, two different worlds. If you think about technology, in one sentence, what does technology do? It melts away the distinctions between time and space. To reach Australia, you need to either fly for 14 hours, whatever it is, 20 hours. Today, you can just communicate in a split second. You can see what's happening there, they can see what's happening here. That's in the world of communications. Technology allows us to tap into the forces of the universe that transcend distinctions between time and space. All technology does that. How could that be? Everyone always understood, what do you mean? This is 1,000 miles away. How could I communicate with something that's 1,000 miles away? You told this to a person that came from the world of camels and donkeys, where they sent mail and they never got a receipt because they didn't know what happened. They'd say, that's a miracle, it's impossible. It's because we've learned that the forces beneath the surface are on an energy level are all connected. It's hard to really explain, and even scientists can't fully explain. You could be sitting right now here. Well, right now, I can tell you right now, there's a woman that watches these classes in New Zealand. In New Zealand now, it's 1 p.m. Thursday. Okay? And she sees exactly my face, exactly as it is. You could be watching a tennis match 10,000 miles away and see exactly play by play, and it's not an artist's rendering, and it's not simulated sound. It's exactly what's happening. Can any of you explain to me how that's possible? What's traveling? How fast can it travel? It's fast. It's faster than the speed of light. It's instantaneous. Okay, maybe a slight delay. And it's the exact image. And you know, if you open up the TV or the internet, you're not going to find people in there.
Is it faster or is it the same thing?
You'll look it up, whatever.
Where am I going to look it up?
It's called Rabbi Google.
I don't have the Google.
So, okay, so you want me to answer your question? Is it relevant whether it's faster or not? It's not relevant to the discussion here. Let's say it's just as fast. It's quite fast. Let me put it this way. It's faster than flying there.
I believe you.
You don't have to need faith for that. Trust me. Book a ticket to Australia and you tell me how long it takes to get there. Not even going to get to the airplane food and stuff like that and the way they treat you. That's another discussion. But the point I'm making here is that, so how do you explain this exactly? And I've talked to scientists and they say, I can't really explain what happens, but we know how to do it. That means that it's not about the miles. It's not about the distance, the time and space, that there's some type of underlying, some would put it like string theory, quilt. Imagine an invisible quilt that connects all space and all time. And if you're able to access that quilt, so if you shake it here, it shakes everywhere, instantaneously. Or if you know a little quantum mechanics, what they call a spooky action from a distance, atoms, whether we understand it or not, can sense other atoms even billions of miles away. So there are different theories that understand how that works. Some say there is an underlying unity, a singularity. You know, God forbid they're not going to use the word God or Hashem Echad, which is exactly what that means. But let's take to the secular language for obvious reasons. That there is a singularity, there is something uniting that we don't see with the eye, but it connects everything. And we have now, in the recent century or two, learned to tap into it. And when you tap into it, you can benefit from it and literally transcend time and space. I understand some will say, well, will there ever be the Star Trek transporter, whatever they call it? You know, that you can actually physically take a person and move them there. Listen, technology today, it's not beyond anything. Who knows? Maybe they'll figure it out. But it's not even relevant. What we have today is quite, I don't call it miraculous because there are rational explanations, but it's suddenly exposed. What did it expose? That there's an invisible universe beneath the surface. And this comes down to, without even getting into any depth, just open up a TV, open up an internet, and what are you seeing right here? You're seeing things that are from who knows how far and who knows from what time. And you can see it immediately. That means that there's an invisible world that was always there, and we're just beginning to be privy to. So from a so-called Torah point of view, from a spiritual point of view, or a personal point of view, what it's telling us is that we are becoming comfortable, and not only comfortable, we're tapping into invisible forces that until recently we just didn't even know existed. So let's just take it a step further. What about the invisible forces in you? What potential do you carry inside of you? You know, many of us feel we're trapped by circumstances, victim of circumstances. Yeah, but you have inside of you something ticking as well. And just like the mysteries of science and the mysteries of technology that have taught us that there are forces within, beneath the surface, maybe there are forces, not just maybe, there are forces beneath the surface that you're not even aware of. And if you were able to access it, it would transform your life. But, of course, the big but we live on the surface level, and we're controlled by it, and we're addicted to it. So really, technology is a tremendous opportunity. Really, it offers us a tremendous opportunity to use it as a role model, almost like a teacher, to teach us of the forces beneath the surface, and that indeed matter and energy and the duality and the plurality of life is not its natural state. Its natural state is integration. Where do we see it best? Look at children. Children are seamless. Children have no duplicity inside of them until when? Until adults teach them how to have it. As sad as it sounds. You start seeing your parents, your educators, and others are duplicitous, suddenly a child learns to be duplicitous. Children are not duplicitous. Children, you hear exactly whatever's on their minds, they tell you, whatever's in their hearts. As a matter of fact, that's why many parents have to tell their children, hey, you don't talk about what's going on inside the house. And for children, the first time you tell them that, they're a little like, why not? It happened. They don't even understand why. So we adults think because they're just stupid, they don't understand that some things you don't say. Maybe they're not. Maybe they're just honest. Maybe they're just innocent. Maybe they don't have self-consciousness where what you see is what you get. Now we think we're sophisticated and they're naive. I would submit maybe they're closer to the truth, and we've developed this fabricated, superimposed state of these different faces we wear and the duplicity, and yes, we can say one thing and stab someone in the back, you can smile to someone and stab them in the back, and the whole duplicity of life. That's why it's very refreshing, frankly, when you see children. We're drawn to children. There's a certain simplicity. The truth is, what I would submit is that you're drawn to yourself, to the child you were once. Because there's something very refreshing, more than refreshing, something radically and dramatically beautiful about innocence. And I'd go a step further, that if I were to define love in a real psychological terms, I would say that's what we crave for. What is love at the end of the day? Love is the total unconditional acceptance of who you are, with your dark side and with your bright side, with your ugliness and who you are. Basically, the unconditional love that we as children expected from our parents. Whether we got it or not is another story. If we did, you could thank God for the blessings that brings. And if you didn't, it has its impact, but doesn't mean you can't. So in a way, how do we search? When people say, I'm searching for paradise, for Eden, there's all the different expressions, for what's the word I want to use? For nirvana. What are we searching for? We're searching for a simple world where we are embraced and validated and not used and not abused and not criticized. Just accept me for who I am. Total love. That's why love is often compared to water. When you go into water, you submerge in water, there's a certain comfort. You feel like you belong. You're completely covered by water. There's a certain... Now, that's not surprising because it's like the embryonic fluids that you were submerged in for 9 months, which is how we begin all of our lives. We begin completely nurtured, completely protected in the womb. No matter what your mother was like afterwards, but that is the way God made us. And the mystics explain, the Torah explains, that the entire universe was once like that. It was all covered in water. Water is an example for that type of seamlessness. It's seamlessness. There's something about it. The evolutionary biologists will tell you the reason we gravitate to waterfront properties and we like water is because once we were amphibians. So in a way, we're still like going back to that amphibian tadpole or frog-like personalities. So we like water. And the Torah will tell you we gravitate to water because water is our natural state. You feel submerged. You feel one. Like a fish in water. When you say a fish in water, like a hand inside a glove. It works. It fits. You will find the people that you most admire, the people that have that sparkle, that have that type of calm and serenity, these are people who do not have duplicity. They have a certain type of seamlessness, and they're calm. They're not living in guilt. They're not living in fear. They don't have these two dimensions to themselves. They're at peace with themselves. This doesn't mean they're perfect, but it means there's a certain fish in water-like quality, and that's a very calming experience. So here we are. technology on one hand is really a soul revolution. It is. It is a soul revolution. As a matter of fact, the Zohar says that as history marches, the march of progress in history is the convergence of spirit and matter, and that's why technology emerges. And the Zohar predicts that in the year 1840, there will be a revolution, and that's basically when we consider it to be the Industrial Revolution, because the Zohar is describing a convergence of spirit and matter. So in this universe in which we live, yes, we have never been so exposed to the invisible and benefited from it. Our great-great-grandparents could not say that. They didn't have anything in their lives except their own beings. Their outside life, there was nothing that was so-called revealing of a deeper force. The deeper forces before electricity, before atomic and nuclear power, what deeper forces were there? There was earthquakes, there were volcanoes, there were thunder and lightning. There were natural forces that indicated something deeper, but they may have sensed it, but they didn't benefit from it. What we have now able to do, we're able to tap into, we'll call it the engine room of the cosmos, and able to tap into it and channel into our lives those forces that are really invisible. And thus we are becoming more comfortable with the invisible. But the final frontier and the big challenge is, can we apply this to our personal lives? Instead of technology being this almost antithetical, as the more we can get connected on the outside, the less connected we are on the inside, can we actually learn from it and say, 1 second, what's the technology of my own soul? What's the technology of my own inner workings? What makes me tick? And there we're far less advanced as we are in the scientific, high-tech world. But we don't have to be. Psychology, modern psychology is a little more than 100 years old. Kabbalistic or mystical psychology teaches that just like your body is made up of parts, so is your soul. And when you nurture and you feed and sustain that inner dimension of your life, you are essentially releasing the equivalent of what technology and science releases today within yourself. And that's the final frontier. We have not yet reached great advancements in that direction, but that's our challenge, because no machine can help you do that. But so when you look at a computer, or you look at an app, or you look at any modern product of high-tech product, it's really meant to be an example, like a mirror, to help reflect on your own inside and outside. That we were able to tap to those invisible forces. What about the ones inside yourself? And the more you tap into those, the more unified things become. That's the interesting thing. The thing we're looking for most is that type of peace and serenity, to know that we're not living fragmented, scattered lives, but that there's some mission statement, some hub, some nucleus that connects it all. That is the most gratifying thing, because then everything you do, from your work to trivial matters to other areas of your life, all converge in that type of force. Exactly what technology does. It converges things, it connects things, and connects them in a way that becomes literally like seamless. So what I'd like to say as a concluding note is this. Every one of us, if you were to list everything you did today, you come up with a list of a bunch of items. And if you look at your life and you start listing the activities, you'll find them to be hundreds and hundreds, not thousands and thousands of fragments. You wake up in the morning, that's whatever your regimen is, you exercise, you shower, breakfast, commute, you go to work, coffee break, tea break, some meetings, some significant things, most are not that significant. And then the rest of the day, I'm not going to go through the list, you can make your list. You'll add up around 100, 120 items. I've tested this. Then try to create a thread that connects these activities. You'll find not too many threads that connect them. Here and there you'll find something connect. You'll find a bunch of little fragments. Pieces, like shattered pieces. And so you could say, well, okay, big thing, so what? But think of it this way. Imagine those fragments start accumulating day by day, week after week, month after month, year after year, decade after decade, century after century. You have millions and millions of fragments. So the Kabbalah, mysticism, has a tremendous analogy in explaining what they call the shattering of the containers. Imagine, this is my analogy I'll share with you. Imagine someone writes the most beautiful book that has in it all the secrets to your life. But then they do something very bizarre. They take the book and tear it into small pieces and scatter it from 30,000 feet up, and now it's all over the place. Thousands and thousands of little pieces. But if you put them together, you can get the story, but they're not together right now. So the Kabbalistic masters put it, they say, the concept of refining the sparks, accumulating the sparks. That each of us is allocated a certain amount of sparks in our lives. And these sparks are scattered like these little pieces of the pages of your story, of your life, all over. They're scattered in the work you do, in the home that you live, in your talents, even in the food you eat, and the people you meet. So wherever you go, there are these little pieces. And you have two options. You're either just going to do your little piece here and another piece there, or you start learning to connect the dots. You start learning to connect these little pieces, and then your narrative begins to emerge. Kierkegaard said that we can only understand our lives backwards, but we have to live our lives frontwards. You know, sometimes you look back and you say, now I understand why this happened, that happened. It all led to something else. But we have to realize the concept of divine providence, Ashgacha Pratis, which is that all the details of your life, you're sitting here this evening, or you're going to be doing something else later tonight or tomorrow. You may think you're doing it for one reason, but you were led there in order for you to find one of your sparks and connect it. So essentially the technology of our personal lives is doing exactly what technology is, connecting things that transcend time and space. Instead of seeing a world of fragmented pieces, you see them all connected by a certain singularity. And the same thing with yourself. That every detail of your life, from the most trivial to the most significant, is part of your narrative, your journey. And the only way you could look at it that way is when you don't think of it in terms of survival, of like, what am I going to gain from this? Or, as I said before, instant gratification or surface level thinking. You think about it, what? Why was I put here? What's the purpose of my being right now in this situation? Why was I blessed with these and these gifts? Why was I challenged with these and these challenges? And then you start looking at it from a soul, through the eyes of the soul, and the eyes of the soul connect things. Because what the connection is, that this is all part of fulfilling the mission for which you were sent to this world. And that mission has many details. And when you live that way, what happens is the narrative of your life begins to emerge. Everybody here is capable of it. But there's one prerequisite. The prerequisite, you have to get out of the rat race and the rush hour of your life, in the sense, I'm not saying quit your job, but you have to have a mindset you're able to step back and say, let me look at my life and not be caught up in the minutia and the details that so often consume us completely. And when you're able to do that, whether it's a minute a day, whether it's through coming to a class, whether it's reading a book, whether it's volunteering or doing something charitable and kind, these things tend to begin to connect the dots. And then the story of your life begins to emerge. So in essence, if you think of it this way, technology has tremendous lessons for us. And when you do that, even technology itself becomes part of your sparks. It becomes part of your opportunity. I always tell this story. It's one among many, but it just captures it well. I was going on a Shabbaton, a weekend retreat in East Hampton a number of years ago, around 12 years ago. And as I was driving Friday afternoon, I stopped for gas. And there was I filled up my car, and there was next to the gas station was a club. And I guess they were preparing for their Friday night party. And one of the parking attendants comes over to me and says, am I staying for the party? He'll park my car. So I said, I'm not staying for this party, I'm going to another party. So he was intrigued. So he said, what kind of party? So I told him it's called a Shabbat party. Friday night dinner. I gave him a little explanation. Anyway, he was more and more curious, asked me what I do. So I told him I write, I teach. I told him, I mentioned my book, Toward a Meaningful Life. It's a spiritual guide to counting the Omer, different things. And then he said, you send out an email, like a weekly email? I said, yeah. So he gave me his email address. He said, please send it to me. Fine. I make off my way to East Hampton, come back after Shabbos back to New York. I give it to my office, the email address, with others that people gave me email. And I didn't forget the story, but, went into my memory banks, and that was that. I never thought I'd hear it from him. Around 7 years later, I remember it was a long time, 7 years, he sends me an email and writes to me. I don't know if you remember me, but I was that redneck kid in that parking lot. You probably didn't think I was Jewish, but I was. My parents both were killed in a car accident when I was a very young child, so grew up in a very difficult childhood. I went from one family to the next family, into nurse and in foster homes and so on. Very tough life. I never got any Jewish education, so I know nothing about it. But since you've been sending me these emails, I have become quite familiar. And he says, I don't go to synagogue, but your emails are my synagogue. And he started enumerating. He says, the Hanukkah email, I prayed to that. The email that comes for the Parsha, for this holiday, and started listing it all. Yom Kippur, Sukkot, Purim, Pesach, Passover, and so on. He says, so your emails are literally my lifeline, and it's changed my life, and I wanted to thank you. So though I don't connect to any particular community, but that's my community, your emails. Obviously I was very touched, and I wrote back to him. But I was sharing it because to me I had like an epiphany. I understood there why God allowed technology to emerge. Not only for this story, but this is an example. We all think technology for business, for entertainment, has a lot of benefits, great. I said to myself, this guy, what would be the odds that he would come to the city to come to a class here? Almost no, he wouldn't do that. But an email, all I did was an email, put it into a system. We press a button, not an extra penny, not extra effort. Literally, without any effort, he gets an email and it can change someone's life. So I could tell you after that I became this harvester. I became like an obsessive harvester of emails. Wherever I go I say email because I see it's such an easy thing. And I tell people, you want to talk about changing the world? Use your list today. It could be email, it could be your text list, it could be your WhatsApp list, I don't know, whatever you're on. Facebook, Twitter. I'm not going to go through all of them. I'm familiar with some of them. It doesn't take any effort to share a kind word. You never know. There may be a bleeding heart, a needy person. A kind word, an inspiring word can change someone's life. And today you don't need to visit them. You don't need to go there. That's how I see the transcendence of time and space. That you can help someone without any effort. Now, of course, it's an effort. There has to be willpower. So everybody's got their list, and I'm sure you use it for all kinds of good things. But maybe add that dimension. Maybe once a day, send to your list. Find a nice thought, something you receive. You don't even have to create your own. Find something that inspired you and share it. That is using technology for the purpose for which it was created. By all means, if it helps in business, it helps people in other ways, keep them busy and so on. But what's their ultimate purpose? Why, at the end of the day, is the permanent mark we will leave is the connection we make with each other. Our hearts to our hearts, our souls to our souls. That's what it comes down to. Words from the heart, enter the heart. I feel it's the greatest blessing and gift to be able to connect to people on a soul level. Obviously, we have connections on many other levels, but the soul level is the thing that ultimately we all need more than anything. And technology is literally that opportunity. And there's really no excuse, as I said, no cost. It's unbelievable. That's why I'm also so crazy about it. Remember from day one, if anyone's come to this class, whenever the technology was available, we were right away on it, YouTube or Facebook or this, because it's not just the ability to reach. I just feel it's a blessing and use it for the right thing. Use it by all means for everything you want in life, but use it for the right thing, which is to use these tools for maybe the purpose for which they created, to make this world a better place. A world that's connected. That's what it comes down, connected. And with that we can connect literally to billions of people, but not connect for selfish reasons, but connect for altruistic ones, for good reasons. Because at the end of the day, each of us is like a musical note in a large cosmic composition. But, till technology, the advent of technology, these notes couldn't all talk to each other. Today they can. We can all talk to each other and play music together in ways that are unprecedented. Once upon a time, it was your shtetl, your town, your city, the people you knew. And today, literally, it can be broadened into the biggest possible level. And remember, in life, it's two options. You're either part of the problem or you're part of the solution. So I'd like to believe everybody wants to be part of the solution. Part of the solution is you don't behave like someone that is reactive. You are proactive. It's not like what you're receiving in your inbox or in your text or whatever it is, and then you respond. Take initiative. Do something. Use these forces as in a proactive way. Reach out. Initiate. Anything in that level. That's how we become part of the solution. In this world, you're either going to influence or you're going to be influenced. And there's no third option. The people who say they're undecided, that's also a choice. And I would even go a step further. I would say, like, that joke where they say, the guy said, I used to think I'm indecisive, and now I'm not so sure. Okay? So, I bless you all that you should all find that inner tech, the inner soul inside your own complex world, and learn from the forces, that the machines that are being built out there that can help us find our own unifying force. And I can say that I feel honored to know you all, to connect in that way. To me, the most majestic thing is the majestic journey of a soul in this world. Sometimes with trials and tribulations, we all have our twists and turns, and we all have our brighter moments and sometimes darker moments, but it's one journey. Just like you journey from day through night, just like the seasons. Trees go to sleep in the winter, wake up in the spring, blossom in the summer, and then go back to sleep in the fall. The same thing is we go through stages, but it's one journey. When you see it as one journey, you can manage anything. And that's the way we have to look at our lives, not as a bunch of little disjointed pieces, but as a narrative. And think about it, and you'll start saying, what is the narrative of your life? What is the inner narrative of your life that connects the details, that connects the dots? So again, thank you for honoring us with dedicating this class. In honor of Rivka Bat Leah for Refuah Shlema. Pleasure to meet all of you. Some of you I see new faces. If you'd like to, since I mentioned emails, I might as well plug it. So I've sent out a weekly email, a way to stay in touch. So please leave me your emails, and you never know. Maybe you can send me an email or two that will be inspiring. We inspire each other. It's a give and take in that way. And everyone have a very pleasant week. We're here every Wednesday around 8:30ish we begin. And those on Facebook, please comment. Same with YouTube. We're using all the channels as possible. I think now, I heard that Twitter now has some type of live video. Anybody heard about that? But this is enough is enough. I can't deal with more than two machines at once. Anyway, everyone a pleasant week. And again, please leave me your email addresses before you go. At least say hello. And everyone be well. Thank you.
On the Apple podcast.